Verse 12, the Apostle Paul writing. Now, some have called him a legalist. I've heard this argument concerning his denunciation of things added to the Word of God. Some have mentioned to me that he was a legalist, and I just, he can get so frustrated with some of the arguments that people make. Verse 12, look at this. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. So that passage just tells us that the Apostle Paul says that not everything in his realm of operation is expedient. Now, he's not talking about things that are in violation of the law, for John would say that would be unrighteousness, and he's not. He's not talking about that. He's talking about the things that are correct, the things that are right. And in chapter 10, we'll look at verse 23. In verse 23, all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. And so the Apostle Paul, when he says all things are lawful, he's not talking about, well, for me, I can commit, fornication, or I can do this or that that's contrary to the Word of God. Don't misunderstand that. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying I have such a spiritual giant status that anything I do is all right. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that things that are right, things that are principles, these things that he can do. Now, I looked up the word expedient to help us better understand this word. The first definition that I came to, and I looked up 3 different sources. The first one I came to said convenient, but based on self-interest rather than principle. That's the first definition that I looked at. Another definition says, quote, useful for effecting a desired result, suited to the circumstances or the occasion, advantageous or convenient. Now that's one definition of expedience. Number 2, in that same book, expedience, based on or offering what is of use or advantage rather than what is right. Guided by self-interest or politics. Can you imagine that? Politics. I'll read it again. Based on or offering what is of use or advantage rather than what is right. So when someone says that the musical instrument or some other addition to the worship of the New Testament church, that it's expedient. Remember that this word deals with something other than what's right. Okay? Advantageous rather than, so choose advantageous rather than right. Rather than right. And then the third definition in that source said, expedient, something that is a means to an end, especially when based on, get this one, especially when based on self-interest. Self-interest. What are we studying? Will worship. What are we finding in this idea of expediency? Self-interest. So when you hear it announced by leadership in the church that we have found it expedient to introduce a contemporary service, what you're addressing is we have found it politically expedient, there's our word, promoted by self-interest groups to add contemporary service. That's what you're looking at. That's the fundamental definition of what's expedient. And we analyze things. Remember the three rules of hermeneutics are what? Direct command, approved example, necessary inference. Those are the three rules of hermeneutics, okay? Hermeneutics, rather. Now, what we're looking at under the three rules of hermeneutics is, the things we're looking at are, is it lawful? Is it by the Word of God? Will it improve the gospel, our adding to it? Will our additions improve God's gospel? Will it do that? Well, someone says it will make our attendance better. James, why would we be concerned with attendance so much, do you think? You and I talked about this years gone by when we received that letter of that, what was it they owed in interest on that church building in Dallas, $1.2 million interest? Something like that, was it? And they were very concerned, and they did, in fact, introduce the instrument, and they did, in fact, introduce praise groups and women leading in service. And the name of the place is Richland Hills. Why did they do that, James? Remember? That's right, because they needed the money. They needed the money. Why? They built an edifice, a church building, if you will, that cost them millions of dollars, and then in the financial crunch of what it's been 10 years ago, then they could not make the payments, and the interest was $1.2 million they owed. Whoa, that's about all my little brain can get around, all right? Just the interest, $1.2 million. That's like telling me the interest on the national debt is $597,000 a minute, which I can't grasp that either. That's beyond me. When you get, when I go to Lowe's and it's $146.30, that's enough for me. That's all the things I want to count. And you have a paper sack. You're carrying it all in your one hand, Do you need any help carrying those out? No. You had $146.30 worth of groceries in one sack. Or let me say that. Charge for that amount of groceries. And so is it lawful? Will it improve or advance the gospel? It might improve the bottom line financially for those with no faith in that God will provide. Number three, is it expedient? These all come under the heading as those three hermeneutics, three principles, rather, of the hermeneutic of interpreting the Word of God. Is it enslaving? Is it something? And that's what exactly that budget or that one mistake leads to another. Okay, you make a mistake in spending yourself in the sense of building something that you cannot possibly pay for. People buy houses like that. Young people, they get married and both of them are working, and, they just knocking themselves out, and they go down and they show the top of their incomes. A financial manager says, okay, we're going to loan you the money to buy this house, and we've set it up into, 95 back-breaking payments, and you'll have no trouble making that if you're not sick any day of the year. If the young lady does not have to lose work because of a new baby, or if your pickup truck doesn't die, or if your car keeps running and you don't ever have to spend money on an oil change, you can make this payment. And you know what? They signed the line. And 2 years later, they're living in some apartment somewhere, and the house has been foreclosed on because they cannot make the payment. Judy Ann's not in here. She's filling in for McKenna, but her niece and her husband, he works for NOAA, the national weather people. You know, he makes a salary that is envious to anyone working for that, and he's pretty high up in that. And she, you know, owns a store selling baby clothes and baby strollers, and I forgot the name of it, everything babies need or whatever they need. And so anyway, it's everything concerning a baby. And it's the high price side of things. My wife said, then she's gone in there and looked around. She said, you know, I would never shop in a place like that because, you know, it's too pricey. The little onesies and the little, whatever the little babies wear, they're just, you know, they're too pricey. And I couldn't shop there. Well, that's her niece. She's kind of pricey. And they built a house that is a marvelous wonder. They built it right there on Jewel's mother's land. Yeah, she let them have that 3 or 4 acres, and they built that wonderful house, and it looks like, you know, the kingdom castle. And you know who's living there now? On Miss Jewel Sullivan's land? Some doctor and his family that bought it out of foreclosure. And so now there is a intrusion into all of that family property there, because all around that farm is broken up, and the kids had tracts of land, and they've all built homes there. And our tract, Judy Ann gave to her brother, the 20 acres, whatever, and so it's all got kids' houses and grandkids' houses on, and in the middle of that family thing sits that one great big house that belongs to some doctor and his wife and family. Why? They overran the budget. Was it lawful? Yeah, if you want to build a house like that. Would it advance a relationship in their marriage? Would it create great stress on the marriage? It did. Oh, it did. Was it expedient? No. No, it wasn't. Is it enslaving? Yes, it is. Is it loving? You might question that. It causes discontent. Did it lead to edification, or did it lead to destruction? Well, it destroyed their credit rating, and it almost destroyed the marriage. So these things apply not only in what we're studying, but just like that church that wrote a letter and asked us, to every congregation in Texas, help send us some money so we can pay the interest on this huge mistake we made. And because not all the churches responded, they decided to add the things that would bring in the big crowds. And so they brought in instrumental music, and they brought in the praise teams and some wonderful women singers and things of that nature. They brought it in, and they have a theatrical performance every Lord's Day there. Now, at 9 o'clock in the morning, they have a small group that meets in one of the wings, and it's called the traditional service. It is. So here's where we are. This is not make-believe. This is not something that might happen. This is something that's happening all over this country. That men in leadership positions are bowing to this will worship. Number 2 and 3, we're going to improve on the gospel drawing power. You know, remember I told you about my brother with that advertisement that he sent out like here. And Wendy, by the way, I've got a copy of the summer series, we talked about. I've got a copy of the summer lectureship series, at least in our area. And my brother told the printer, said, well, just put what you normally do. You print these out before. And the guy said, yeah. And at the bottom of it, it had, free beer and pretzels served every night. Carol Seitz like to have a fit. Yeah, Edward showed him that because at Carol Seitz in a series of gospel meetings, free beer and pretzels served every night. That first night there's a big crowd. There's a big crowd. That would draw a crowd, wouldn't it? Sure it would. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the New Testament worship. In its simplicity, the church finds its uniqueness. And if you destroy the simplicity, you destroy the uniqueness of the gospel call, that it's not of the world. It is in the world, but not of the world. That we are called out from the world, so don't bring the trappings of the world into the one thing in the world that has no worldly trappings. You understand what I'm trying to say? So you bring it. It's like a boat. A boat is in the lake, but it's not of the lake. When you make the boat of the lake, you no longer have a boat anymore. You have a subsurface vessel. The thing has sunk, and it has become one with the lake. So the church, to allow innovations, if you want to call it that, intrusions, if you want to call it that, let's use our word, let's call allowing expediencies into the worship, then we have become no different than the world in which we were called out of. And so there's no margin. There's no border. There's no, as I said, Bob Wilson, there's no boundaries. There's no boundaries. Someone says, well, that's just legalism. Well, there is a legalism in this universe that cannot be denied. You cannot fly off this church building. You cannot. Because there is a law called gravity. You cannot do it. Okay? Bob, can you starve weight on a cow? Can't do that. Huh. So there are certain laws that we understand and accept, and we're not called legalists for it. We're not. I had a guy tell me one time, I said, man, I got to go. I got to get home and milk. And he said, I wouldn't hold a cow that couldn't hold her milk overnight. And I said, you ever milked a Holstein, You ever milked a cow that gives 6 or 7 gallons of the milking? So don't tell me about holding their milk. A little old Jersey cow, it gives 1.5 quarts, Yeah, maybe you could do that, but not a Holstein, And so there are natural laws that you cannot violate, and no one calls you a legalist. No one at all. Matt Phillips not here. We had a wind damage to a wire over here on the other side of the preschool, and I told Judy I said, babe, open the door, that side door, so they can come in to the breaker box thing, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I leaned over the fence. That's the closest I got to the work, okay. I leaned over the fence, and I said, hey, you can get in there and turn the breaker off and blah, 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 and okay. Well, they decided to work it hot, and that's all right. You know how they knew it was hot? Philip got in it. So he danced a little jig, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, there is a law about electricity, and you don't violate it. If you're grounded and you handle electricity, you are in for a what? Shock. There you go. How about that? Huh? And I found out years ago that electrical work's a shocking business anyway. So there you have it. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about, is it lawful that make you a legalist because you drive 75 instead of what that guy gets stopped for? They had that on the banner on the internet, 144 miles an hour. Wow, 144. Can you imagine somebody on a busy highway driving 144 miles an hour? That endangers everyone. It does. Just because the car could go that fast doesn't mean it's right to do it. Well, he would call us legalists, wouldn't he? Because I wanted to do it, I wanted to drive that fast, and I don't care what happens. If he had hit somebody at 144 miles an hour, he would have killed everybody concerned. We know that. We know that. Yeah. Lauren, that was a near miss, wasn't it, up here at the hill? And that guy, what they estimate his speed? 140 miles an hour. And you were witness to how far that car shot out through that field, and it was found in little pieces, wasn't it? Killed the driver. We are grateful that you missed him by the narrowest of margins. That guy missed Lauren and her children. My goodness, man. Who would have been horrible, wouldn't it? That would have been horrible. So, is it expedient? Well, my car will run 140 miles an hour. That doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean it's right to use it on a highway where we are hauling children and are hauling even ourselves. I don't want to be hit by myself in my shiny new truck. I don't want to be hit by somebody doing 140 miles an hour. I don't care to have that happen at all. And so we're looking at this word expedient. Yeah. Under the noun, an expedient thing, a means to an end. Under the use of a noun, a device used in an emergency makeshift resource. All right? That's still, does that sound like in the church? Now, we get close to panic sometimes. James, didn't you mention to me one time that all the song leaders were gone on some Sunday and I was gone preaching somewhere, and you were about to have your audition as a song leader? Did your blood pressure rise, James? Did your heart beat a little fast? Because when I came back, we came back, and Baden was back, and Billy Wayne was back, and I forgot, and James said, all of y'all at the same time are not going to be gone anymore, you know? All right, so a device used in emergency makeshift resource. James was about to devise one, I think. Yeah, maybe beating on the drum and hollering ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, or something. He wouldn't do that, but I'm just kidding. All right, under the noun, something contrived or used to meet an urgent need. Is there an urgent need? Now, I realize some of our singing to our ear sounds horrible. How many of you have tried to lead singing when the audience spoke a different language? How many of you have done that? Nathan, have you done that? I'll agree with that. Okay. Mike, how about you? You have. Okay? In India. So there's a kind of a difference in what is it, in cadence? Is that what? Help me out, Sarah. Help me out. When you're singing like that, what's the deal? Huh? Okay. I do. Okay. Thank you for that, because that understand. I have tried to lead singing, for example, in a Russian audience. Uh, I have tried to lead singing in a Eskimo Native Inuit language. I have tried to lead singing in the interior Indian Abyssinian uh, singing. I tried to lead singing in that, and I have also tried to lead singing in Blackfoot Shoshone. And now you're telling me why it sounded so terribly awkward for us to. The tune is there, okay? There was one tune in Russia that we could all sing on the tune, and that was "Oh to Be Like Thee." And I think probably the reason we could is because is that a yeah. And you've explained to me now why that I have had so much in times past trying to do that. Uh, and so there would be an excellent opportunity, you see, to say, Lord, this is not working, so I'm going to add something to blend us all together. And so that would fit under the noun form of expedient, something contrived or used to meet an urgent need. An urgent need. In one instance, in Bidder Bashan, I was playing on their guitar in the Red River Valley, and one of the guys recognized the tune, and then he picked it up in Russian, and it was. I put the guitar down. It it was so, cadence was wrong. So I just put the guitar down. Couldn't do it. So here's what we are looking at in our relationship and worship. God designed the church. Give me a show of hands if you do not believe that. I won't stone you. I just want to know. God designed the church. Matthew 16, Jesus said, upon this rock I will do what? I will build. You learn that from the time you're that big in Bible study in the churches of Christ. Upon this rock I will build my church. Okay? All right. If you build your house, do you want to build it like you want it or like I want it? You know? If I had to landscape around my house, it would have asphalt right up to the edge of the house, 100 yards wide all around it. There'd be no weed eating, no mowing, no flower watering, no bush trimming. There would be none of that. I could just walk out, get in my shiny new truck, and go about my business and not spend time watering and all of that. But some of you might not like that. Might not like that. I saw one place in Oklahoma where my wife and I stopped there. They'd asked us to come talk to them about working there. Oh, it's been 100 years ago. And we went there, and the church building was big. Congregation there was about 400. And the preacher's home was built facing it on the left side of the church building. What it used to probably been yards and all that, but with the enclosure of that facility and the fence, and it was paved all around, and the preacher's home set out in the middle of that parking lot. And I said to my wife, I'd love that, no grass to mow. And she said, that is the reason that you tell them, no, we're not interested. And I said, yeah, but the lake's right here, and the crappie, and she said, no, Michael, and I mean no. I wouldn't live there for all the tea in China. And I said, roger that. And so we didn't enthusiastically pursue that. Helton, Oklahoma. If you ever by there, if they hadn't tore that place down, go by there and look. Huh? Is that right? Well, see, I envy them on account of the, no grass. We're out of time. We're going to be looking at, is that right? I didn't know there were two places that existed with it. Is that right? Okay, number 4 next week, is it enslaving? Will it enslave me? Okay, that's what we're going to be looking at. Thank you for your attention. And Sarah, thank you, and Mike, for helping me with that music